Good morning, everybody, and thank you for attending our webinar today. We're going to give it one more minute. We still have attendees flowing in, so we'll get started at 11:01. Thanks.
Hey, Mike, you can still hear me, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thank you.
For broadcasting. Okay, it's time to officially get started here. We want to send out a big thank you to you and welcome to those of you who are able to attend our event, the Pros Who Know virtual event on parcel shipping, Living Dangerously, a holistic guide to hazmat shipping. My name is Mike Brown. I am Senior Digital Marketing Manager with Labelmaster. Labelmaster wants to send a big thank you to ProShip for having the vision and understanding of the times to develop an event safely dedicated to advancing compliance and efficiency in customer shipping operations. Additional sessions included in ProShip's virtual event can be found at proship.com. I want to start off with some housekeeping first. There's no call-in number for this webinar, as you realize, so you must utilize your computer's speakers for audio. This is being recorded. All registrants will receive an on-demand copy of this presentation to share post-webinar. Our team is managing the Q&A portion of the webinar, so please feel free to submit your questions in the question area, and we will get through those as best we can. You will see a handout section for your screen. Feel free to download those resources at your leisure and feel free to use them. Now I'd like to introduce today's presenters. Clint Boaz is Senior Sales Engineer with ProShip Inc. Clint has 17 years experience working in multi-carrier shipping and logistics technologies in support of clients in every industry from small startups to the most recognized brands in the world. Mario Sagastume is responsible for Labelmaster's software and customer success teams. With Labelmaster for over 6 years and loves to work with customers to understand their true business pain points and to provide actionable, repeatable, and reliable solutions that resolve those concerns. In his spare time, Mario likes to listen to music in small local venues and is a big advocate of DePaul University. So without any further ado, gentlemen, take it away.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike, for the introductions. This is Clint, and I'm excited to have this opportunity to address this audience today. And today we're going to be talking about one of the topics in shipping that generates some of the most questions and causes a lot of concern for shippers, and that's hazardous materials shipping, or Hazmat, also known as dangerous goods, or DG. And it's understandable because of all the safety concerns with transporting dangerous goods. Nobody wants to be responsible for a plane catching on fire or anybody being injured or anything like that, certainly. And there are penalties, there are fines that can be incurred if you don't ship dangerous goods properly. And I imagine a lot of this anxiety is something that, Mario, I see a lot of Labelmaster customers may be struggling with, and some of the things that you see in your line of business.
Absolutely. Thanks, Clint, and good morning and good afternoon to our guests. And we do see many companies, including shippers, manufacturers, distributors, and 3PLs, who are challenged by the complexity of DG shipments, especially in our current and quickly evolving environment. Hopefully, in today's discussion, we will review with you how the right information, the right preparation processes, and the right technology can demystify DG shipment and enable your company to ship DG safely, compliantly, and efficiently every time.
And that last part there, efficiently, is key. We, of course, want shippers to ship dangerous goods confidently, but we want them to do it as efficiently as possible as well. And To that end, last year, ProShip and Labelmaster started working more closely together. ProShip created a new engine, a new module in the ProShip suite that integrates the ProShip shipping software with Labelmaster's Dangerous Goods Information System API. It's also known as DGIS. And since then, we've had a lot of great conversations with our existing ProShip users, some potential ProShip users, and we've talked about the way they process hazardous shipments. And there've been a lot of great conversations. They've been very eye-opening for our shippers, but they've really been eye-opening for ProShip as well. And based on questions that we've received at ProShip in those conversations, it became pretty apparent to us that a lot of shippers really want a better understanding of the hazmat shipping process from beginning to end. And I found that anytime we just jump right in and start talking about shipping labels, dangerous goods declaration forms, compliance validation, all those things that happen immediately in the warehouse, the conversation can get confused pretty quickly. And I've always wished that we had taken a moment to step back and to take a look at the shipping process at a higher level, rather than just diving right into one or two aspects of that process that happen in the warehouse. And in some of those conversations, there have been some misconceptions that have surfaced about hazmat shipping. And so what we wanted to do in today's agenda is we want to take that step back and we want to provide a holistic overview of the shipping process for dangerous goods and follow the activities and issues that you'll experience from the moment you decide to bring a dangerous good into your inventory through the process of shipping it out the door, and then even talk about some things that happen beyond that. So in this, we're going to provide an overview. We're not going to talk about a lot of specific cases. We want to keep this fairly high level and look at the overall process. And that is really the basis of our agenda today. We've defined the hazmat shipping process as being in three phases here: identification, shipping, and post-shipping activities, with some specific aspects and topics that we'll be addressing. And we're going to take a look at this process from beginning to end and hopefully give you an understanding of what you need to do in order to end up with a good end result.
Indeed. And speaking of that result, Clint, and for our guests, we've all been part of successful projects. And how those projects start, those successful projects start, is you try to capture all of the requirements up front and asking the question, how should this new solution work for you? What should it do for you? In other words, what does a good end result look like? You want to start with the end result in mind. You want to start with success in mind, which is DG shipments in this environment, which is DG shipments that are packed, documented, labeled, and shipped compliantly and efficiently to meet your customers' expectations. That's easily said, but how do you get there? Well, typically we see situations where resolving DG shipping challenges are left solely to our colleagues in warehouse operations because, candidly, shipping is their principal area of expertise. As a very crude analogy, let's say that your company is known for making outstanding high quality shirts, impeccable cuffs, collars, sleeves. The materials, tools, and training that you use in your company are the best in the industry. Yesterday, in an effort to diversify your product line, your company put in a bid and won a large contract to manufacture lab coats, and a very large order is due later this month. Well, you have the materials, you have the tools that you need, so let's get going. I know the example sounds ridiculous, but this is frequently the position in which we put our colleagues in shipping operations when we don't give them sufficient lead time and information about what they need to ship. Hopefully today, Clint and I will provide you with some additional insights about identifying and filling those information gaps.
Thanks, Mario. And do want to start out here by just pointing out that as we go through this, keep in mind your own situation may be unique. The advice we're going to provide today is not intended to replace the guidance of a trained hazmat professional who can review your individual requirements. We're going to provide some examples. We're going to show you some things to look at, talk about some tools we've encountered based on our experience. And we trust that that will give you a good basis for doing the further investigation and what you need to do in your particular scenario. But I want to introduce on the next slide here a roadmap. And this is a pictorial view of a roadmap for a hazmat shipping process from beginning to end, also known as our agenda for today. And this is available as a handout, a version of this in the webinar tools. So if you want to download this, you're certainly welcome to. But this is going to be kind of our map to the park today. We're going to refer back to this throughout the presentation. We're going to follow a "you are here" indicator throughout the progression of the discussion. And some things I wanted to point out about this. First off, we have broken up the process into those 3 phases that we're calling identification, which are more your upstream activities, shipping, which are more your downstream activities that occur in the warehouse, and then some post-shipping activities that you may encounter. And you'll also notice this is broken up into a few swim lanes. The first one there shows the process that a shipper needs to go through, the business process for onboarding and shipping out hazardous materials. And then you'll also see some sections there that refer to specific tools and integrations that are available from Labelmaster and from ProShip to assist with that process. And I'll refer to those things throughout the presentation, but really our hope is that we can focus today on that process, that broad process that you need to go through as a shipper. And then for specific tools, specific things that we can assist with, both Labelmaster and ProShip, we would invite you to have some further discussion to see what we can do to assist you with integrations and technology support. But the first step that you'll see here is procurement. And procurement, bringing hazardous materials into your product line. One of the first questions that you need to ask is, what is a dangerous good? And I found that the answer to this can be pretty surprising. Can't it, Mario?
It certainly can't, Clint. And folks, we're preaching to the choir here when it comes to DG, and it's a very rich answer. And by the way, we're using hazmat, the terms hazmat and dangerous goods interchangeably here. Hazmat, we know it's more widely used in the US. Dangerous goods, more widely used outside of the US. But in this conversation, we're using them interchangeably, okay? And the definition that we're using for both terms is that it's any substance that can pose an unreasonable risk to health or safety of operating or emergency personnel. A risk to the public and or the environment if not properly controlled during handling, storage, manufacture, processing, package, use, disposal, or transportation. That's a broad definition. In addition to that, there are many products that are considered DG. We have them classified in 9 different classes, and these include gases, corrosives, radioactive materials, and explosives. Lithium batteries are considered DG, in some cases under Class 9, and they receive lots of attention since many devices in our daily lives use them. Our phones, cordless tools, PCs, laptops, tablets, they're all over the place, ubiquitous. And these are among the more complex and constantly changing DG shipping regulations. When the COVID-19 shelter-in-place requirements started, I'm sure we all recall that toilet paper was the commodity in demand. We all saw articles in local and national news. However, most folks don't know that shortly after the toilet paper spike, another spike followed, and that was for personal care items. They came into sharp demand, and those included nail polish remover, and hair trimmers. The latter may contain lithium batteries. Additionally, as you take a look at this infographic, in the lower right-hand corner, you will see hand sanitizer. We've had many inquiries from distillers of spirits on how to handle shipments of their new products. So if you're a shipper in this currently rapidly changing environment, you're going to need guidance and tools to help you respond quickly. Not only will you need to know whether the items that you're shipping are classified as DG, you also will need to know whether these shipments are fully regulated or accepted or limited quantities. Clint and guests, in summary, this means that shippers today need to make many shipping decisions quickly and accurately.
Thanks, Mario. In that making decisions, being able to react quickly and accurately has a lot to do with planning. And planning really begins in procurement, that moment that you decide to manufacture or bring into inventory dangerous goods. And why would you want to do that to begin with? Well, the first reason is obvious. It could just be the nature of your industry, your line of business. If you manufacture or resell and ship industrial chemicals, you can't get around these shipping issues. You've been neck deep in them for a very long time. What we find happens a lot of times, though, is an established shipper with years of experience shipping non-regulated commodities, they'll find themselves almost overnight needing to get set up with a good hazmat process. It may be a toy distributor that brings on the hottest new toy and it's got a certain kind of lithium battery in it that they've never had to deal with before. Or maybe a fashion retailer brings on a new line of fragrances or oil lamps or something that initially you may not think were hazmat, but upon further investigation, they turn out to be qualified as DG. And you may have business partners. We see this quite a bit. If you're doing drop shipping on behalf of another business, or you're a 3PL and your sales team signs up a new partner and they've got DG in their product line, all of a sudden, we've got to go to school and figure out the challenges and how to overcome them. And sometimes, may find ourselves unprepared to face these challenges. And again, Mario, I'm sure that's something that Labelmaster sees quite a bit of.
Indeed, and I believe that our guests see this quite a bit as well. But I can give you a perfectly good example of a 3PL scenario, following the logic that when they sign a new business and they receive goods to ship, and they have very limited instructions and information about the products. They tell us of situations where they have acquired a new relationship, a new account, and that's exciting, and rightly so. And they have a short window to start shipping for their customer, and they want to do it right. The product arrives at the dock. The customer sends a spreadsheet with basic internal product information. Yes, they give you a SKU number, they give you the quantity of the product, and a brief description of the product. Then the fulfillment orders start coming in, and warehouse operations just at that point realizes that the product is DG and that they're going to need more info to process these shipments. And that's when they go into hyperspeed. It's a good thing that warehouse operations caught the DG before it shipped out of compliance, which may result in rejected shipments, additional charges, and potential fines, and much worse. But now they'll have to delay these shipments and get more details about the products. And as our guests know, Clint, these product details are available and could have been captured way upstream.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's one of the misconceptions we run into quite often is that there's a misconception that the folks in the warehouse are the ones who are solely responsible for figuring out how to ship a dangerous good. And also that the time to identify and classify a dangerous good item and find out all the data about it is at shipping time. Mike, if you want to step back up a moment. Thank you. So on the slide here, you know, we call out a couple of points that come into play with gathering information. There's a lot of information you've got to gather, and that starts at procurement. You may need to gather the United Nations identifier for an item, its proper shipping name, packing group, etc. We'll talk about some of that item master data momentarily here. And you need to identify the source for that information. Your vendor should be providing you with an accompanying safety data sheet and information about that item, or you may need to obtain a safety data sheet from elsewhere, from an original manufacturer, from a government site. But you need to start collecting that data because really that job of preparing your operation for shipping that commodity begins that very moment that you start bringing those items in-house. All right, Mike, you can forward now. We'll talk about the next step here, and that step is classification. And this is where Labelmaster can provide some tools, and we'll mention those momentarily here. But let's talk about classification as a concept here on this next slide, because it's another step where there's possibly some confusion around it. And in classification, we're looking at a commodity that we're bringing online. We're determining if it's hazardous, the degree to which it's hazardous. You know, is it fully regulated? Can I ship it in limited quantity? We need to identify any training that needs to be put in place. We need to identify rules and procedures we need to put in place to make sure the folks in the warehouse are going to ship it properly. That training could vary largely depending on whether you intend to ship via ground or air. So you need to identify that. You need to identify business rules that you need to define and implement. And one thing to note is that that includes both physical rules related to things like storage of that item, packing of that item, but also logical rules that you might have to put in place in your enterprise software systems. Everything you do physically in the warehouse, you want to model that logically in your supporting systems. And you might need to make some system changes to guide that physical process. It's like, for example, if you can't ship more than 5 kilograms of an item in a box, according to the regulations, you might want to make a rule in your order management system or your warehouse management system or your shipping system that prevents someone from picking and packing and shipping a quantity greater than 5 pounds for placement in a single carton. So you want to identify those things, and it all takes knowledgeable, well-trained individuals to accomplish, Mario, doesn't it?
It certainly does, and you know, based on our experience and the experience of our guests, I'm sure that when you ship DG, you quickly realize that, like with all regulated matters, you need personnel who are properly trained and have access to the appropriate publications and resources. And with these individuals need help, and they will, they need to have access to qualified and trusted third parties. As a service to the industry, Labelmaster offers a regulatory help hotline. Please feel free to give us a call or email us when you have questions about DG regulations or you're looking for general regulatory guidance. In addition, Labelmaster assists many customers in all of these areas with qualified consultants whose deep expertise can help you across all shipping modes and industries, including air, ground, and ocean, for with experience in the pharma, chemical manufacturing, retail, aviation, broadline distribution, and auto manufacturing industries. They conduct site audits. They can help classify products. They deliver DG training that is customized to your products, to your operations, and your processes. Clint, for our guests, the regs hotline contact information is listed on the Labelmaster website, on the resources, and our consulting services are in the services section of our website.
And I think that that's again, another misconception that we've encountered in some of the discussions we've had, there's a misconception that you can entirely automate this process and remove the human factor. And you really can't do that. You've got to have folks who are well-trained, who are knowledgeable, who are responsible, whether that's your own in-house compliance team that's been trained in hazardous regulations, you're referencing those compliance resources and the regulation sets that are available, trusted third parties like Labelmaster who can bring consultative expertise. Unfortunately, there's no magic Google for hazmat classification where you just enter, a general description of an item and it tells you all the things you need to know and exactly what you need to do in your process. There are certainly tools out there to assist with this. Labelmaster and their suite has a dangerous goods advisor that's very useful for assisting your staff with doing this classification work and identifying all the data that needs to be applied for a shipment. But it still takes people who know what they're doing to make it work. And there's a lot of effort that goes into this classification step. So next up on the roadmap here, we have data storage. So now that you've decided you're going to bring a hazmat item on board, you've procured that item, you've got as much descriptive data about that item as possible, you've gone through classification activities, identified business rules. We're going to talk about data entry because, again, this is a step that often gets overlooked. So with storing all of that data that describes the commodity, you've uncovered that during procurement, you've uncovered it during classification, and you've got to put that somewhere for later use. And that later use is going to be, among other things, when you're actually preparing a shipment and you've got to provide that data on your paperwork and in your electronic communications for the shipping carriers and to satisfy the various regulatory authorities. For any given hazmat commodity, there are a slew of data fields that you need to have on file. You need to have the UNID, the United Nations identification number, proper descriptive shipping name, packing group, packing instruction, the unit of measure for that item, the hazardous class. All of that you have to have identified, and you may only need a few of these elements if you're doing something that is not as hazardous, but if you're shipping something that is extremely hazardous like radioactive materials, you may need to provide a couple of dozen unique data fields about what that commodity is at the time of shipping. And the availability of that data is important. It needs to be available enterprise-wide. You want one source of the truth for that data. You don't want multiple disparate data sources where some of that commodity information is in the WMS, some of it we've got in spreadsheets. For this particular product, we've got a paper list of instructions that's scotch taped to the wall next to the packing station. You want a consistent data source, and you want it to be accessible to the people and to the systems who need access to it. Most importantly, it needs to be integrated in with your shipping system. A lot of our customers choose to store this in a single system of record. They might call that the item master or the material master. That might be tables in their ERP or in their WMS. I know that Labelmaster and their suite also has a parts repository where you can store some of this information and reference it using your unique SKU numbers. But we want that information to be available and to be integrated into other systems where needed. And another important aspect here when we're talking about preparing and processing shipments is that you've got to model the data for your shipments properly. Shipments, packages, they're physical things, typically in cardboard with taped up. They can be heavy. You drop it on your foot, it might hurt your foot. But that package should also be represented as a logical entity that's moving through your system, because the compliance software, carrier compliance software, hazardous regulatory compliance software, it can only react to the data that you're feeding it. If you're not feeding it an accurate, logical representation of what you're physically doing, you're not going to get good results. You're not going to get good paperwork. You're not going to get good validation. And an example that comes to mind when I've thought about this, I've had a couple of shippers ask me what happens when they ship via UPS ground or FedEx ground service to Alaska and Hawaii, because they're preparing it as a ground shipment, but they know that it's ultimately going to go on a plane. And they said, you know, we're always confused about how to prepare those shipments. Well, the truth is you're not supposed to do that. It's a violation of the UPS and FedEx tariff to ship ground service outside the continental United States. But the fact that they were doing that and not getting flagged is showing me that they're not modeling the data for those shipments properly. If they had flagged those as hazmat, then the ProShip software itself should have said you can't do that. It's against carrier compliance to ship ground service to Alaska and Hawaii. So the compliance result is only as good as your data. You want to make sure that you're properly flagging your shipments and maintaining this data in your systems of record.
Those are great points, Clint. And just one more item to add. You need to decide as a company who's going to be responsible for owning and maintaining this data. It's an ongoing process.
Yeah, great point, Mario. You know, identifying who's going to keep this up to date, check it, refresh it, rather than letting it getting stale for years and years, and maybe in some cases even decades. All right, so we're going to make a transition here on our roadmap. We're going to go from those identification upstream planning type activities. Now we're going to talk about the downstream execution and a lot of what happens in the warehouse. And I'll say that this is where good planning will pay off in smooth execution. You want to do all those upstream activities, make sure you've got good data, do some test runs, validate that you get a sensible result, make sure that your end users are trained, that they're comfortable with what they need to do in the warehouse. But all of that work that was done up front is going to pay off. All that good planning, that good diligence is going to pay off with smooth execution in the warehouse. We're actually going to start here with a discussion of packing. And when we talk about packing items for a shipment, a lot of this has to do with the packing materials themselves, doesn't it, Mario?
It certainly does. And the proper execution of packaging, which we know can be manual or automated, is key to the successful process. Since DG products differ, packaging requirements also differ. Your trade personnel can drive the selection of the proper inner and outer packaging materials. They can set the proper quantities as well as compatible materials and all those business rules in your system. But I guess the rhetorical question at this point to our guest is, how do your processes, how does your technology help you to enforce those packing rules?
That's a great point. It's a great question. Trained people following a predictable process, supported by the technology, is key to make sure they're applying the proper packaging materials, that they're making sure that they're not shipping quantities that are disallowed. Within hazmat, you've got the concept of a Q value. If you're shipping multiple commodities together that are hazardous, you don't want your Q value to exceed 1. And you want to make sure if you're putting multiple commodities in a container that they're compatible, that you don't have incompatible commodities together according to the regulations. So the people aspect is really important to that. You want trained people, but putting in validations, putting in technology support to make that predictable for those people is key. So let's go on here on the process roadmap. Now we're going to get into the point in the process that I'd say is most near and dear to our hearts at ProShip, and that's the actual processing of a shipment. So you've got a box or boxes or a pallet or whatever it is, and it's time to get that out the door. And it's where our own integration with Labelmaster software comes into play, and that's illustrated a bit in that handout, but I'll talk about the two major aspects of that integration between ProShip and Labelmaster here. It's really in support of two major activities you want to do at time of shipping, and that's validation and actual printing of your documents. And validation is a step that is often unknown to shippers. They don't even know that hazardous shipment validation is a thing that they can or should be doing. So hazardous shipment validation, it's where you check your shipment against the regulations to see if there's anything about that shipment that's out of compliance. And an analogy to this would be what happens with address validation. And everybody should be familiar with the concept of an address validation. But why do you do an address validation before you ship? It's because if there's an error in your address data, the carrier is going to have problems delivering the package. They're going to ding you with an address correction charge. So before you ship, you hit an address validation service, catches that potential problem, lets you correct it before the package goes out the door. And a hazardous shipment validation is essentially the same type of thing. It lets you check your shipment against the regulations to find any problems. Maybe you're shipping a commodity via air that can only go via ground, or maybe you've exceeded the allowable quantity for an item, or maybe you've placed two incompatible commodities packaged together in the same shipment. A hazardous validation will catch that, and it can save you a lot of problems down the road. And that's a capability of the Labelmaster DGIS API that we've built into the ProShip software, is that Hazmat shipment validation.
Indeed, indeed, and that validation is a subtle but extremely important point. Putting a form together is one step in the process of validating a shipment. Some of our prospects would tell us, hey, they don't understand why the carrier rejected their shipments. So, hey, they told us we had all the forms on the shipment. Then we start asking questions like, were the quantities and packaging acceptable for the mode of transport? Were the proper shipping name, regulatory labels, and emergency contact information properly displayed? Did the carrier, FedEx or UPS, have additional requirements? Did you reference the current regulation? Validation, again, that subtle point of validation brings the belt and suspenders approach, giving you peace of mind that you are shipping compliantly. As Clint alluded and mentioned, and as Clint stated above, many solutions are already in place using the same logic of validation. The address verification, the system validates the address. In some cases, it will amend it. When warehouse operations receives the pick and pack tickets, the ship to address is validated. They know that they can use it and they can go ahead. And the packer preps the package, prints the shipping labels, and the shipment is ready to go. DG shipments can follow a similar logic path by adding regulatory validation.
Yeah, and that's a great point that can all be done up front as well, the same way that a shipper may do an address validation or a rate shop at order entry time. And they may want to do a hazmat validation up front before that order is even picked to make sure that what they plan to do later on downstream in the warehouse is allowable, so they don't work themselves into a situation that has to be corrected later. So validation is important. Documentation, of course, we all know is important. You got to print your compliant shipping labels and documentation, provide information to the carriers electronically as well, but also regulatory forms, dangerous goods declarations for the various regulation sets that are out there, 49 CFR, IATA, TDG. Those depend mainly on your geography. Shipping ground within the US, you're constrained by the 49 CFR, Title 49 Code of Federal Regulations for the DOT standards. IATA is an international standard for shipping air. TDG is for Canadian origin. ADR in Europe, you've got IMO maritime. So a lot of the determination of the regulation set is based on your geography, but based on your mode of transport as well, whether you're shipping ground, air, or ocean or whatever. And there are specific declarations that need to be produced. And Mario, as I understand it, those regulations for validation, those declaration definitions change.
They certainly do. Regulations and declarations are in constant change. And it is important to stay current with these changes. And as you know, Clint, in the integration with ProShip, and DGIS is generating the declaration forms, and Labelmaster is keeping the regs as well as the forms up to date.
And that's one of the advantages of leaning on Labelmaster, since you're providing all of that information as your chosen career. It really brings peace of mind to our shippers that they're validating against the latest regulations and producing the most compliant forms. So what does all this look like in terms of an integrated hazmat and carrier compliance process? This graphic here really shows how we've accomplished this and the integration between ProShip and Labelmaster. Because when you're shipping out on the warehouse floor, you want to create a well-integrated process that's seamless, an experience that's seamless to the users, that makes hazmat shipping as predictable as non-hazmat shipping. And this graphic illustrates how we've enabled this with our integration. And really everything starts here on the warehouse floor with that step one, where your operator is logged into their shipment processing. That's their shipping software, their warehouse management, wherever they're executing shipments, and they load up the information for that shipment in step one, typically done through a scan of a pick ticket or something like that. And all of that information, like your ship to address that you would typically need for any shipment, is loaded up, as well as all the commodity information that describes your shipment. And I have to say here that this step one, going back to what I said at the beginning, when we've launched into just talking about this process without talking about everything that happens previous, generates a lot of confusion. One of the most common questions I get is, where does that information come from? And if you've been following us along here on this webinar, now you know, you have a good understanding of all of the identification activities that need to occur before a shipment is executed. But you should have all that information in a system of record, comes into your shipping software, your WMS, wherever it is. And then within the ProShip software, you can select Labelmaster, and that step two is your service. And what we do with that is we take that information, that logical representation of the shipment, we send it up in steps 3 and 4 to the Labelmaster DGIS web API. They do a validation to make sure that that checks out according to the latest regulations. What we're doing is compliant. If there's an error, they'll send back an error, give the user an option to fix it. And if it passes the validation, then we proceed on through steps 5 through 7 here, where the ProShip software will then render the carrier compliant shipping label and any dangerous goods declarations for your 49 CFR, IATA, TDG, whatever it may be. All of those print out simultaneously. So that way, that same type of scan, weigh, ship type of process can be used, whether it's hazardous or non-hazardous. And there may be some variations on this. Some shippers may want to enable all shipping lanes in their warehouse to be able to process dangerous goods with trained personnel staffing those shipping lines. If you ship a lot of hazmat, that's probably what you want to do. Other shippers may want to have just one shipping lane in their warehouse set up to process hazmat, where they've got staff that are trained in the hazmat regulations. And then of course, we've got a lot of shippers that are doing print and apply automation, and they might have an exception station where any DG shipments are diverted to, and where they've got their personnel who can pack, inspect, and label the shipments. Regardless of what works most efficiently for your scenario, take advantage of the technology offerings, leverage the technology to make that process as seamless as possible. And that's what we have attempted to accomplish with the ProShip integration. So now let's talk about labeling. After the carrier shipping label, the dangerous goods declaration, they've been printed and attached to the package, you're probably going to have to apply other markings to the box. So let's talk about labeling. And one of the misconceptions that we've run into is that the shipping system prints those labels, those multicolored, various shaped labels. And it's really a misconception because, as I understand it, Mario, there are specific regulations about how those stickers should be printed or applied.
That's absolutely right, Clint. And the labels, the markings, is another key component in shipping DG compliantly. There are very, very specific regulatory requirements about the size, the colors, and formatting of the labels. They also need to be sturdy enough to withstand the rigors of transport. Do you think that a label printed on paper and affixed to the shipment with Scotch tape can make that journey? That's a question that we actually get from a number of prospects. Hey, can I print this in an 8.5 by 11 and just put Scotch tape on the package and send it that way? So you be the judge. These are eloquent examples of what can happen in the journey. Okay. And a question to our audience as well. How frequently does the arriving shipment look like the shipment that left the warehouse? It's a tough journey out there. And to help you with how the package should be labeled, DGIS generates a labeling diagram as it is illustrated in the middle of that slide. We can show you, based on the information, based on the commodity and the mode that you're transporting, what labels and in what order and in what locations they should be placed in that particular shipment.
Right, and those labels are generally pre-printed. They're available on rolls. I know that's one of the things that Labelmaster provides is keeping their shippers supplied with a stock of those labels. All right, so last step in the process roadmap here, you're tendering your shipment to the carrier, your items out the door, but it's not over yet. There could be other activities beyond that point. So I want to talk about incidents response and the potential for return shipments. So with incidents response, what happens if there's an accident, if a package breaks open, if there's a spill, if there's a fire? Again here, Mario, I guess having a good plan is key.
Absolutely, and the proper markings and packaging can decrease the likelihood of incidents, but incidents do happen. And as the saying goes, when at peace, prepare for war. You will need to have in place, information processes to help carriers and responders when they call you for additional information. Have the DG product information, including safety data sheets, easily accessible. Provide contact information for knowledgeable team members. So when they get a call, they know what to do. Many of our customers and many of our attendees will be familiar with the name Chemtrec. A lot of our customers use Chemtrec services to meet these requirements. And as you can see on the labels on the upper left, on the upper right-hand corner here, that's how the information, that's how the emergency information is displayed on the labels that we produce for those customers.
All right, thank you, Mario. And the last point here would be returns. some shipments live beyond their initial journey, right? And there may be a need for the recipient to actually return that back to the shipper.
Indeed, and I can give you specific examples in the pharma industry. We work with several pharma companies. One of the processes that we have in place with them entails returns of medical devices from customers, from the end consumers, back to the manufacturer. These devices may qualify as biohazards. So the process our customers have implemented starts with the end user contacting their customer service department. The customer service representative has a list of the products that can be returned, and the list shows whether the product is considered DG. You remember that single source of truth for product information, the classification of the product. This is another use for it. If the product is DG, then the customer service contacts Labelmaster and requests that a specific kit be sent to the end user. The kit has the proper packaging, the proper labels, the declaration forms, and detailed instructions for the end user to follow. The return process is successful because it allows the pharma company to receive compliant shipments from its customers while informing the carrier and the recipient that these are DG products. Clint, we're back to the initial point. It starts with the fundamental product information.
Yeah, absolutely it does. Packaging, labeling, receiving, all that fundamental planning that needs to be done, and it really begins at the beginning of the cycle. So let's summarize here. We've gone through the process per our roadmap, and really, again, as the way Mario started off this discussion, as you begin this journey of determining how to implement a good hazmat shipping process, think about what you want in mind. A nice, well-packaged hazmat shipment that has proper inner and outer packaging, proper labeling, compliant forms that are up to date, that are in spec with the regulations, and they can be shipped safely and confidently. And that includes, to get there, all of these steps that we've discussed today: identification, whether it be procurement, classification, data entry activities, all those upstream processes, shipping activities that happen in the warehouse with your picking, packing processes, shipment processing, proper labeling, and then being prepared for those post-shipment activities, incident response and returns. And this information following this process should provide you with confidence to be able to get a handle on your hazmat shipping.
Absolutely. From our perspective, you can get a handle on your and demystify shipping hazmat. Start with that defined desired end result, what a successful DG shipment looks like, and with an understanding of the bigger picture as we have discussed it here today. And most importantly, lean on your trusted, knowledgeable, and experienced partners like ProShip, like Labelmaster, for assistance and expertise. Thank you.
And at this point, if anybody has any questions, we're free for a few minutes here to take a couple of questions. So anyone wants to submit a question via the feature on the webinar manager, we would be glad to take those.
Hey, Clint, we have one question that's come in so far. Which carriers ship dangerous goods? I think that's probably in reference to air carriers, and I think that's more of a Mario question.
Well, I think I am aware that the likes of UPS and FedEx do accept DG shipments if they're properly labeled. If you have the proper account set up with them, they certainly can. And obviously, the shipments have to be properly labeled and marked. Most carriers will accept that, but you do have to give them the heads up. You do have to let them know ahead of time of what they'll be transporting. Clint, any difference? Any difference in that response?
No, other than to say that, you know, with USPS, generally you're limited to like ORMD or limited quantity via surface transport only. So, you know, extreme limitations there shipping with USPS, as I understand it. And then with your LTLs, it may be a scenario where you just need to talk with your LTL carriers to determine which of them will accept dangerous goods versus which may not. All right, at this point, I don't see any other questions that have come in on the chat. Certainly, if something comes up or if you want to handle it offline, we are very willing to discuss any of your questions with you. Again, specific technology offerings from ProShip and Labelmaster, we're glad at any time to talk about how they can assist you, we'll talk about your processes, things of that nature. So feel free to contact us via the contact information that's available on our respective websites. But at this point, I want to, sorry, just one more question just came in here. Can you explain the difference? Scroll up here, I lost it. Can you explain what qualifies as an overpack? Or is it different for each dangerous good? Mario, I'll give that one to you.
Thank you, Clint. The overpack is the matter of taking a shipment really and include mixing, not mixing, but combining that shipment with additional items for that one parcel. That's possible depending on the compatibility of the items that you're shipping, depending on the quantities that you're shipping, and it needs to be properly marked. The compatibility and the overpacks do differ by commodity, so that's something that would have to be checked. I know that's a high level answer, and then Clint, if you've got more detail, I welcome that.
No, other than that, it's something that I believe will be validated with DGIS, and then as well should be printed out as markings on your declaration forms, like your IATA shipper's declaration, if the item is packed in an overpack.
It doesn't look like we have any additional questions. So with that, we will conclude, and just to again say thank you. And for more information, please visit ProShip.com and feel free to contact the ProShip team there. Additionally, please feel free to contact us at Labelmaster by going to our website, labelmaster.com, where you can explore various ways to get in contact with us, including our regulatory hotline, which we're happy to answer your DG questions. So with that, we're going to sign off and say thank you very much and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.